Good evening, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here tonight and talk on a topic that is so close to my heart. Thanks, Jorge, for your very detailed introduction, and thanks, Claudia, for your very informative presentation. Before I proceed, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land where I'm talking from, the Derek Nation, and I pay my respect to their past, present, and emerging. Let's share my screen, and then I'll take you through my presentation. So I'm going to talk about the crisis in Afghanistan and how STARS responded to this crisis. So in my presentation, to just refresh our memory, I will briefly talk about wars in Afghanistan, about Afghan culture, ethnic group, and religious groups. And then I'll talk about the impacts of this crisis on Afghans at individual, family and community level. And then I will talk about STAR's holistic approach and the way that we work in using integration of community development in clinical work. So 4 decades of war and unrest in Afghanistan have had and still having a significant impact on general population in Afghanistan. And it is resulted in millions of people becoming refugees. Millions are killed, internally displaced. And also, it also changed that structure and infrastructure of the society because it's been a very chronic conflict. And this chronic and complex conflict resulted in a significant changes in the whole society structure. Many Afghans have been exposed to chronic conflicts, but also multiple trauma and multiple losses, which will have a subsequent impact on their psychological and mental health. To begin with, war started in 1978 when the Soviet-backed regime commenced targeting a large number of population, mainly middle and upper class Pashtuns and Tajiks, as an enemy of the revolution. So people were imprisoned, tortured, disappearances were common. And then in 1979, in a cold winter night that still disturbs my memory, Afghanistan was occupied in a blink of an eye by Russian, and they remained in the country until 1989. And during that 10 years, heavy war was between the Russians and the opposition group backed by the Western world. And in 1989, when Russia withdrew their troops from Afghanistan, a civil war started between the communist regime and the opposition groups. And then another bloody war started between different fractions after the collapse of the communist regime. And gradually Taliban also took over Afghanistan. And in 1996, they were controlling 85% of the country, and the only part was mainly north, and it was Panjshir province that was kind of led it in under late Commander Massoud. From the time that Russian withdrew their troops from Afghanistan until 9/11/2001, Afghanistan was forgotten from the world. Unfortunately, after 9/11, it became, the world remembered Afghanistan, but for a very wrong reason. And then in 2001, the US-led coalition invaded Afghanistan, and they began war on terror for 20 years. Even though some sort of democracy and stability came in Afghanistan, but still we had witnessed terrorist attacks, suicide bombs, fighting between different fractions, including the Taliban. And unfortunately, in August 2001, Afghanistan was taken over by the Taliban, again in a blink of an eye, which has led to a severe humanitarian crisis and severe human rights violation. And some Afghans say, I mean, as you see, war is not something new for us, but some Afghans say this is the worst of the worst that we had experienced. And the world had witnessed the unimaginable images of Kabul airport when desperate Afghans were trying to flee. Afghanistan geographic location in waves of invasion brought different ethnic groups to the country, with main ethnic groups are Pashtuns, Tajiks, Hazaras, but we have also Uzbeks, Amaks, Turkmens, and Balochis. Pashto and Dari are two formal languages in Afghanistan, but most Afghans are bilingual, but Dari is a widely spoken language. Nearly every Afghan can speak Dari. But we also have Uzbeki, Turkmeni, Hazaragi, Hindi, and Urdu, and there are 30 different dialects are spoken in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is predominantly an Islamic country with 99% Afghans are Muslim, 80% Sunni Muslim following the Hanafi schools of thought, similar to Turkey, which is a very modest version of Islam, and 90% are Shia Muslims. We have a 1% Hindu and Sikh and Jewish as well, and there are also a number of converted Christians. And prior to 1978, Afghanistan was a very modest Islamic country, democratic, open, and tolerant as well. Despite the differences between different ethnic groups, Afghans are dignified and proud people. Despite their differences, they share core values in common. Afghans are known for their toughness, bravery, strength, and resilience, patriotism, hospitality and generosity. I mean, as a proud Afghan, I can say no one can beat our hospitality. Literally, you cannot walk out of an Afghan house without being fit. And the common expression of our home is your home is used by Afghan to make you feel welcome in their place. Honesty and friendship. So when the Taliban took over, it impacted Afghans with individual, family, and community level, and we're going to unpack this now. At individual level, most Afghans were shocked and disbelief. They couldn't believe what happened to them, and grief and loss, but also it was grief and loss not only because of losing their loved ones, but also to anticipated grief of things that were gained in the last 20 years, like freedom, democracy, and some level of democracy, education, human rights, and so on. And then obviously they were triggered and re-traumatized. Anger, resentment, survivor guilt were presented a lot, and concern about the family members that they were overseas. Actually, Afghan workers, we received a substantial amount of phone calls from Afghan individual that they were not after counseling or anything. They just wanted us to get their family out of Afghanistan. And then obviously we have a number of asylum seekers, additional level of distress for them, and then because of their own uncertain circumstances, and people were overall confused and uncertain about what would happen. And then sleep problems, I put sleep separately because it's not because of their anxiety, depression, or PTSD symptoms. Literally, they were staying awake all night to catch up with the time zone of the rest of the world, speak with their extended family members, but also to watch news from Al Jazeera and other resources that they wanted to. At family level, Afghan families are scattered around the world. So, and basically they've been in contact with the rest of their extended family, which is from one hand, it's good, but on the other hand, they are exchanging latest information about Afghanistan. And unfortunately, there's not much good news. They're all bad news that they share, and that intensify the level of distress and psychological distress, financial support, stress to support their families, but also the Afghan communities divided across different ethnic groups. And then sometimes the division in the community became so intensified that had impacted specifically mixed marriages if when the couples are from different ethnic groups, but impact on children and adolescents. Afghan adolescents and youths reacted differently. Some of them became more Afghan than anyone else. Specifically those, even they were born here in Australia, they became actively involved in kind of raising the voice of Afghans through social media in any other venues. But also there are groups of adolescents and youths that they didn't want to be identified as Afghan, too embarrassing for them to be linked with really terrorist groups like Taliban's. When this Afghanistan crisis took place, Sydney was also in the worst time of COVID pandemic in lockdown. So families were already under stress. There were homeschoolings and not being able to see their loved ones and being locked at home. Was a lot of stress anyway, but this crisis added to their already existing stress and tensions about amongst family members. Afghan community impact on them. The replacement of Afghan flag was considered as an attack on Afghans' pride in dignity and identity. We had this flag for centuries. And then also, although Afghan community is divided across different ethnic groups and religion groups, but they are united against the Taliban, but still there are a group of people that they are supporting Talibans. Each of the main ethnic groups have been affected differently. For instance, Pashtuns, because a big number of Talibans are Pashtuns, so they may have been rejected and alienated by broader Afghan community. They feel isolated and some stereotypization amongst them as well. But we need to bear in mind not every Pashtun is Talib, nor every Talib is Pashtun. In fact, a big number of Talibans are from Arabic countries, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and also from Pakistan, Somalia. But also we have Tajiks and other ethnic groups that they are Taliban as well. And then Tajiks have been really affected by and large, specifically Tajiks from the north, because the Panjshir province and neighboring districts are have been the only resistance, strong resistance against the Taliban, and they have been actively involved in fighting against them, but also they have sustained heavy loss of human and indiscriminatory killing of the civilians, and which is continuing until now. Like literally, Taliban are searching for them door to door to find them and kill them. And then the Hazaras have fled. Most of the Hazaras have fled the Taliban prosecution, so they're really re-traumatized. But also, their ethnic minorities at risk of being prosecuted by the Taliban as well. And so people are dealing with their own helplessness and hopelessness. And then Afghan communities disappointed with the scope of the Australian government response to this crisis, because we didn't see anything generous response to this crisis as it happened previously when other refugee communities were in the crisis. So that creates really another level of disappointment and anger for Afghans. In terms of mainstream Australian society, while most Australians have been really empathic towards Afghans, but current COVID situation, floods and bushfires, all this domestic stuff, like people want to focus on domestic issues. And crisis in Ukraine also kind of took away attention from, in some degree, from Afghans as well. Fears that is presented by Afghans are that they are going to be targeted by the Taliban because of their ethnicity and because of their religious belief. And then also a loss of freedom under the Taliban, which we can see it in kind of women's rights and in the way that things are going in Afghanistan. People are afraid that Afghanistan is going to be divided. And then the Russian invasion of Ukraine has triggered many Afghans because we were invaded by the Russians. So while Afghans feel for Ukrainians, no one can feel their pain as much as we do, and we're really sorry for what happened in Ukraine. But at the same time, the level that internationally response happened to Ukraine in comparison to Afghan is it's uncomparable. And plus, since the Ukraine crisis, Afghanistan is kind of crisis has been overlooked. We can hardly find anything in media that covers Afghanistan while at like the crisis still continued. And Afghans are concerned that we are going to be forgotten again. Feeling regarding coalitions, Afghans are express angers and frustrations and disappointments towards the US-led invasion because it was pointless. Trillions of dollars were spent in Afghanistan. 100,000 of Afghan civilians were killed. Thousands of coalition troops were killed. At the end, after 20 years, Taliban were replaced by the Taliban. So what was the point of this war? And then, so in a feeling of betrayal, specifically that we're left again and alone. And when Joe Biden split the 7 billion frozen funds of Afghans amongst Afghan, but also 9/11 victims for their family, it created a lot of anger for Afghans because Afghan civilians are paying the cost for a crime that they never committed. And then feeling that history is repeated and like the world is putting a blind eye, but also despite that looming humanitarian catastrophe, Afghanistan is going to be forgotten. So looking at the statistics as stars, historically, we have provided support for over 7,500 Afghans. Currently, we have 814 Afghan clients. And the orange shows evacuees and the purple shows Afghans that they are already residents of or they're living in New South Wales. As you can see, the highest number of referrals started from August. And then in September, we got evacuees. And then in terms of referring back to counseling, some of them were referred to counseling and some of them were referred after 3 months follow-up. In terms of gender, majority of the clients are female and both evacuees, but also those who are residing in New South Wales. In terms of age group, the evacuees are a quite younger age. The highest number are between 25 to 35 years old. Most of them are highly educated. Some of them really speak well English. And then also we have quite a big number of children, and 10 orphans are also referred to stars. It is interesting in terms of ethnicity. 593 people didn't identify a specific ethnic groups. They didn't state it, which most Afghan would to be referred as Afghans. But from our contact with the community, the majority of new arrivals are from Tajik ethnic backgrounds, second by Hazaras and some Pashtuns as well. How STARS work to help with this crisis? We worked holistically with individual families, refugee community, and mainstream society. We work very closely, like the counseling team, like Victoria Foundation, we work very closely with our community development team in school days and team in trainings team as well. So some of the common presentation that came out of psychosocial assessment was kind of separation of the family, concern about their safety, and also the traumatic escape journey that they had from Kabul airport or from other parts of Afghanistan, presented with really severe nightmares. And some of them, they left Afghanistan in military aircraft. There are several pregnant women amongst them, and also sensitive to loud voices, specifically children, and then some health, physical health and psychological health issues, a temporary visa, and legal and immigration stuff, and also moving from short-term accommodation to longer-term accommodation. Specifically, some of them are big families finding that appropriate accommodation has been difficult, and then issues for children and teenagers, because if they are not moved to permanent accommodation, so kids can or children cannot get enrolled at schools. And then also for elderly evacuees, the cultural bereavement and transition and worries about their family member has been really significant. With individual, we give priority to Afghan clients, saw them within a week to 2 weeks, and specifically assessment of Afghan clients related to crisis and they were not evacuees. So we provided support for them, but also we did psychosocial assessment of evacuees from 1 to 3 sessions. And then in this assessment, obviously we found out about their priorities and did appropriate referrals and provided some psychoeducation, linked them with Afghan community associations and organizations for further support. And then we had a follow-up, 3 months follow-up sessions. At the initial stages, that's why we did a follow-up sessions, because most of these evacuees were confused about different services, and also counseling is a new concept for Afghans. They were all, in addition, they were all into practical settlement stuff. So that's why we did follow up. However, people who needed counseling at the beginning, we referred them. We referred them to crisis interventions with follow-up assessment of evacuees. Some of them are referred for counseling, some of them are okay. Some of them are really, again, in survivor stage and not ready yet to receive counseling. In terms of family, we provided family assessment for different family members, but also we use our family and cultural transition program. Most of this stuff has been done online because we were in lockdown when it happened, but gradually we are going to face-to-face. And then also we provided debriefing and self-care session for parents, and then and we developed psychoeducation resources for parents, like podcasts in Dari and other video clips that I produced myself, and then we refer them to appropriate services as well. In terms of Afghan community, STARS has a long and a very strong foundation of link with Afghan community with different ethnic groups, and based on that foundation, we were able to support them and also to consult with them about their needs and priority of the community, and kind of lobby and advocate on their behalf, link them to influential people, to politicians, to provide them with media trainings and other trainings, but also we help some of this organization to apply for settlement grants, and some of them got it, which in turn they will use that fund to help Afghan evacuees. We also made sure when things went online to have representative in Afghan community, like we went to welcoming dinners and any other functions that were organized by different Afghan communities for evacuees, and our community development team had also visited evacuees in their temporary accommodations as well. These are the list of Afghan community organizations that we work with them closely, in particular in the last 6 months, although they are a big number and they're from different parts and different ethnic groups, but successfully we were able to work with them. In terms of mainstream Australian society, we work with partnership, not only with services in New South Wales, but also with our sister organizations like Malaluka, BFC, and other organizations as well. We work intensively with schools and work with educators and teachers. We provided them with trainings, debriefing sessions, and also for students, we did a lot of well-being sessions, debriefing sessions in these different schools, as well as for parents. And then also, since other organizations like Red Cross and Amnesty International and lawyers they have received a substantial number of referrals from Afghan community. That's why we had to provide debriefing and self-care sessions for them, because they were exposed to all these traumatic materials. And so they are more equipped with the tools and skills to look after themselves, and then in turn they can work with Afghans. We work very closely with Afghan GPs, and we link our evacuees with them. Some of our evacuees didn't have Medicare or any other cards. And then we linked them with several Afghan GPs that they provided their services on pro bono, free of charge. And then that was some of our mainstream work. So in conclusion, the current crisis in Afghanistan has had a significant impact on Afghan refugees residing in New South Wales, and of course on evacuees as well. Through a holistic psychosocial approach, STARS has provided support for Afghans in this crisis at individual, family, and community level in broader Australian society. We are hoping that Afghanistan will not be forgotten again, and traumatized Afghans receive the support that they deserve. Afghans are incredibly resilient and proud. We are so strong that in worse circumstances, we'll pick up the pieces of life together and we'll try to rebuild our lives. And then we trust that this time will pass, and we will see smile again on the face of beautiful Afghan girls like this girl. I'd like to acknowledge and thank all of my Afghan colleagues from clinical and community development teams for their incredible, tireless work with Afghan community despite their own pain and emotions. Much of their work have been reflected in my presentation. I also like to thank my non-Afghan colleagues for all the enormous support that they have given us, but also for their incredible and amazing work that they did with Afghan evacuees and other Afghans. So for me, without my STARS family, I would have not survived this time. So I'm really grateful to have that support behind me. I'd like to also thank Mariano Coelho and Gordana Hall for their contribution and input in STARS presentations. Here are some reference, mainly my own publications, so I'll take questions in question time. Thank you very much.